All right, so a lot to work on this week, you know, health-wise, but also schematical to continue to improve. Like when you guys asked last week about the playoffs, we've kind of been in the playoffs for three games now, so we got to continue to improve to stay alive for that, and a lot of stuff to work on.
I know you were kind of asked in the moment Saturday, especially what it meant with you, with your father, but also I think a video went around of you hugging your daughter. Just what does it mean for you with that win and kind of how y'all have had your entire family kind of relocate to Oxford this year?
Um, it was a cool moment. I really caught up on all the stuff, and then, just for her to hug and say, Pops would be really proud of you was just a special moment, and I ended up when she was upstairs here, just kind of, thinking too and thanking her, a couple years ago when I think it's kind of documented the Auburn decision, and staying here. And, when she had said during that thing, decision process, hey, I just got here when she moved here to live with me to go to Oxford High. And then she was coming to Ole Miss. And, just said, don't leave me now. And so it was just kind of cool how things happen. And, so I just thanked her because those moments wouldn't have happened.
I'm not sure if this was brought up on the call last night, but I think a month ago during that y'all's first bye week, you talked about bye weeks kind of being overrated from an advantage standpoint, preparation and whatnot. But considering the situation now, after a big euphoric win like Saturday was and getting certain players healthy, do you feel like this bye week came at a pretty convenient time?
I do, and normally I don't. A lot of times like them when you're in rhythm winning, and having two, kind of dominant wins like that. Whatever, 50 points between the last two wins. But because of health, obviously with Trey, that's exciting to think about how well we're playing without the best receiver in the country. And, was on pace to shatter every record there is, I think. And so to think about him coming back, it's a really good time. And I do think there's a lot to that. It's very hard to come back. Not that they would. I told them today, not that they wouldn't have, but that's very challenging, to get up again after that emotional type of a game, and them hearing, all week how they're the greatest team ever and all that they're probably hearing out there, and that's very challenging. So, and I think you guys saw Jackson got hurt in the game, and I think, played a lot on adrenaline and painkillers in order to do what he did. So it's coming at a good time for him from a health standpoint.
Lane, is anything in
Sound like a Morgan Wallen song, by the way, right there. Adrenaline and painkillers.
Anything surprising you about the parity in the SEC? Are so many teams that are looking at 10-2 or 11-1? And what do you think is the result of that? NIL have the biggest factor on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, one that I don't know I have the exact answer to, and I try to figure all those things out in analytics, and I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe you don't have dominant elite quarterbacks, in the league as many as there has been at some times. People say the NIL thinned out in the portal, but also, those, whatever you want to call them, traditional elite teams, people will say, okay, well, they should have risen because of the portal, or they should have fallen because of the portal because people went and took their backups. But also they went and plucked people and made themselves better too. So maybe it just is what it is, and there's not, a dominant team like there has been at times. Georgia over the last years, previously Alabama, where they're kind of beating everybody, and they're, above everybody in the conference. So maybe that's part of it. And then you added Texas and Oklahoma since. So you kind of created a National Football League conference. And in the National Football League, people don't go undefeated. They lose games. And that's what you're seeing happen.
With all the talk about two lost teams and just strength of resume finishing strong, Have you thought about how to weigh the importance of getting guys like Trey back for these last 2 games versus the importance of having them extra healthy for a potential playoff run?
No, we got to win these 2 games. We got to first get better this bye week, and then next week we'll talk about going to beat Florida. So no, we certainly are not in any position to start thinking about, the players for the playoffs versus making sure we're winning these games. And I think this team, you're seeing it play its best football, these last 2.5 games. If you would have said you're going to go into Arkansas and win by 30 and beat Georgia by 3 scores, you'd say you're playing really well and probably would predict your record's better. But I think as I look at it, it makes more sense of what's happened. This was kind of like an NBA free agent team where it's put together late. There's a lot of late pieces, off-season surgeries. Princely's not there. And so I think what you're seeing is just like when those teams are put together, they take longer sometimes than teams that have been together for years, and then they perform better later in the year, and they screw up early in the year sometimes. So I think that's what you're seeing here, where some people would say right now we're playing as well as anybody in the country, which we are, but I think that's a product of that. A lot of late pieces being added, some injuries happening. And now, really outside of Trey coming back, most of the pieces are there and playing well and playing healthy.
Lane, this time a week ago, you said you kind of went against your nature and discussed the rankings and y'all's kind of big picture situation. Seeing the rankings yesterday or what tomorrow's might be, did you address that at all this week with the team or your thoughts on them?
I didn't really. I just said we got to get better this week in the bye week, and rankings won't matter unless you keep winning. So we got to keep winning, and I would think the ranking that matters is tomorrow. We've always joked about the coaches poll. Is kind of in here, and as coaches, it's really like the SAD and the GA's poll. Because a lot of coaches don't even fill it out, and coaches shouldn't. They don't watch the games. So I've never taken anything in that. Like when somebody said, I think we beat Georgia by 3 scores, but Georgia's ahead of us, and I was like, well, it's a coaches poll. That's a bunch of Kyles voting.
I'm curious, Lane. I know your focus is on Florida, Mississippi State, and on, but how the portal's coming up. How much do you have to battle guys on your roster being tampered with this time of year?
I mean, it is what it is. It does help, when you're still alive for playoffs, in my opinion, because you got a little more focus on that. But there's still, that happens, and at the same time we're in this, we also got to prepare for the future. We spent, yesterday afternoon, last night, watching already people that we think are going to be in the portal and how we're going to retool next year's team to, make another run like this.
Lane, now that you've been able to evaluate some of the game film from yesterday, some videos surfaced that appears that Jackson Dart has had one of the better pockets over the last couple of games than he's had all year. What do you attribute some of that success to with the offensive line playing so well?
Well, I think, Nate missed the game before, which we moved well anyway, but I think him coming back, and he played a great game, very physical, dominant left guard game. And I think in general, the rest of our group's, better pass players and run players as a group. And so we protect better. Left tackle's a really good pass protector on his backside. So I think that attributes to that. They've done a really good job. And really, that game was really clean. We discussed it yesterday. It was a clean game. 3 total penalties on the entire team in an emotional game like that. No offensive penalties, and 1 sack that was actually Jackson's fault. That's really good line play.
Lane, in the spring, you talk about, bringing in so many new players and developing chemistry and how difficult that can be. But looking right now, it looks like the chemistry is very good. And I guess you guys have to be pretty proud of the evaluations you've done, bringing in guys with good character and that fit in.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. It's why free agency doesn't always work in professional sports, or as you look in college sports now. Last couple of years, every team that just went and signed really good portal classes hasn't meant they've played really well. So we put a lot into that. Besides just the film work, figuring out who the players were, and it's never an exact science. But our guys have bought in really well and done a really good job. And I told them today, a lot of the people in this is the team meeting room, and a lot of guys in here that have reduced roles from what they were playing at previous places or what they even envisioned, and it just worked out that way. And they've done a really good job of handling that and playing limited roles or special teams and buying in, which isn't easy to do, because a lot of them, it's their last year.
I would think it's probably kind of tough to assess with, the dominance up front defensively, but have you kind of seen the defensive backfield evolve from probably the first 4 weeks of the season?
Yeah, they've done a really good job limiting explosive plays and coverages, and I think Golding's done a really good job. And again, this is, like I said, this team's playing as good as anybody in the country right now. As you look at okay, which teams are playing the best, which I think that's supposed to have a lot to do with where you ranked in these playoffs and stuff. Part of that is us getting to know the players too, because there's so many new players on defense like that, and we've moved Kennedy's spots on defense, because we didn't have a lot of background with all these guys playing with them, and so I think it's why you've seen an improvement too, because the players have been here a little bit longer and our coaches are getting used to them too.
Lane, I know when you talk about looking in the portal or even high school culture and a player's demeanor is kind of what you look into. After getting that second loss to LSU, where it was completely possible that a team could kind of go off the wheels, what do you credit this last month for what this team has done?
Players, leadership, Jackson, other guys, these two linebackers, phenomenal leaders, and how they practice, prepare. So I credit the players, and I credit, I said, hey, if you're going to change, eventually you've had enough, or you don't, or you just keep going. But if you've had enough of some part of your life, like I told them, you're going to have different stages of your life where you're going to say, I've had enough of this, I'm making changes in your life. And I told them, or you can keep, screwing these games up at the end, and the narrative can be, you guys just came here, for money, and you really, Ole Miss can't be one of those teams that really makes an elite run, and they can't be a championship team, or you can have enough. And I said that at the locker room at the halftime of Oklahoma, and I feel like at that point they must have, because since then it'd be hard to argue that there's anybody in the country playing better than these last 2.5 games of football.
Did you get a piece of the goalpost, Lane? And what did you make of that scene?
Actually, one of Knox's buddies, Hud Clark, brought that up last night. Somehow he had a cutout piece of it. He was knocking on my window last night up here. And, it was a chaotic scene. And I'm kind of torn on that. Obviously, it's enjoyable for fans and stuff, but we also have policies that aren't supposed to happen, and you got to keep the players safe and the other teams safe. So I don't really like that aspect of it, that we're not doing what we're supposed to do. And so it was a little frustrating at the point that the game's still going on and it's happening. So I know a lot of people are like, how can you be frustrated? You're winning the game and the game's over, and it's just, I don't know. Maybe that was my Coach Saban in me there, Kyle kind of had a little bit of that from me, my frustration. But, it was exciting for him. But I don't know. I'm kind of torn on that too, because the other team's got to be safe and get off, and they can't. And so, I don't know. I'm sure Kyle has a plan for that. It'll be a good problem to be in again.
Kind of along that same subject.
You're
Obviously,
like the most famous SID, by the way, nationally, because I refer to you so much in the press conferences. I feel like, yeah, you just basically get blamed for everything. Yeah, I also blamed him for the fireworks too, that they weren't high enough, that the smoke was too low. We couldn't start the fourth quarter because I had him delay it because you can't see. And I'm like, how are defense backs going to see when they play action? Like, quarterbacks should play action. You can't see anything. And so that was his fault too. The fireworks were wet or something, he said. So they smoked too much. It was too smoky afterwards.
Kind of along that same subject, you were in the stadium, 10 years ago when they tore down the goalposts when you were on the other team. So when you kind of learned of that and all the euphoria coming to that, did any of that come to mind?
I did for a second. We walked out of here in the press conference Saturday after the game, and Kyle was there, and I was like, whoa, this is a weird feeling, because I remember actually walking over here, because my brother was on staff, to congratulate Hugh, on the win. And he was too busy in here, so he didn't actually come out and see me. But so it was kind of a weird recall moment of being on the other side of it.
Did you say you were the one that got the delay for that fourth quarter? I always wonder how that conversation went.
I just told the ref, we're not playing. I can't see. Like, you can't make us play in this. Like, and then I saw Kirby over there, and I think he was kind of trying to figure out what was going on. And I'll give the officials credit; they did pause. You can't see. So I'm worried about, hey, we got the lead, the game's going under our control, and now they're going to run a play action. Our DBs can't see the ball.
Anything else for Coach? All right, thanks.
No squirrel questions.